Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 11th episode of The Professor and CEO. And this is a exciting episode for me because we're in some ways celebrating 11 years of ThirdWay. So ThirdWay turns 11 this Sunday, the 29th of November. And we decided for this session to name it 11 questions that every CEO should ask and answer. And a couple of people have commented this morning that I'm a bit nervous, so don't know if I'm looking forward to being under the spotlight, but I think it's very important that we do this. And the reason is, and sorry for the long introduction, is that Rachel and I started this series to give people an insight into what it's actually like being a CEO in a crisis and where to go for advice and where to look for examples from the past to help you drive your business into the future. So Rachel, I'm excited to throw myself at these questions. So anything you want to add in the introduction?
Yeah, just to say that my name is Rachel Dorn and I'm a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship at Goldsmiths, and my research relates to entrepreneurship in times of crisis with a focus on crisis management and resilience. I do other things as well, but these are some of my main topics to explore. And and to sort of follow on from what Ben has been saying, that we think it's really important. ThirdWay's just turned 11, and I think for any business leader to sort of step back and reflect and think about what the last, not only what the last few months have been like, but also the last few years, to try to ascertain the bigger picture. So it's important for those business leaders, but I think also quite important for the people that work for them and with them more generally. So again, Ben is on the hot seat today. And without further ado, our first of the 11 questions. Ben, what's your idea of business success?
So I grew up in a household where both my parents ran their own small businesses. I didn't actually recognize this in my mother until maybe only 4 or 5 years ago. She was a childminder. But what it meant was every day she opened her home and ran the home as a business unit where people would pay her to look after their children, and she had to look after clients and so on and so forth. And my dad ran various small businesses, and my dad would always be talking about his business around the dinner table. And I remember him saying something very early on in my life, I don't know, it might have been 12 or 13, which was, when you are a business owner, you have a business when you don't need to turn up and it still works. He said, if you run a business but you need to be there every day, you've got a job. And that always sort of stuck with me. So from starting ThirdWay, I've always said, my job is to make myself redundant. My job is one day to turn up at work and everyone say, we don't need you anymore. Like, what do you actually do here? And that's what my idea of business success is like. So whether that's, we take over the world, whether it's we build an office on the moon, or just that whatever we're doing in any kind of niche is going so well that people don't need me anymore, it means I've built something that's successful.
Thanks, Ben. And when would you say you actually achieved that? Thinking back, is it possible? Was there a point when you finally thought, I've achieved?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think I have achieved it, although maybe to a varying degree. I've always felt I was actually going to set myself a task this year, and COVID went and blew it out the water, where I was actually going to take 3 months off and say to the management team, I'll see you in 3 months. My phone's going off, my laptop's going off, and just to see what business I would come back to. And I had no doubts areas would be better, but I also had some concerns that some areas would be worse. So not there yet, but definitely working towards it. Okay,
cheers. And what would you say, in your view, in your experience, makes a great business leader?
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I would say it's something a leader should always be thinking about, because you should always be looking to improve yourself. So I'd say this is like an observation over 11 years of meeting loads of business leaders and seeing some mistakes I've made myself. So I would say the first thing is, most great business leaders I've met are B pluses at everything. Like they are good all-rounders, and they can take their hand to many things. And they're really comfortable with not being the smartest person in the room. And I would say seeing business leaders who've held their businesses back, often it's when they want to be always the go-to person, always the problem solver. Whereas the great business leaders I've seen are just very, very comfortable being able to recognize the other person in the room who to look to lean on, and to let lead. I think most great business leaders I've met do have vision, and that's either their own vision or they're totally aligned to the business vision and they can communicate what that vision is, so that everyone in their organization, everyone in their management team, their clients, any other stakeholders know what that company's about and know what that CEO is driving. They tend to be people focused. Like I've not met many great leaders who don't recognize the real importance of people. And I've also recognized that people see through leaders who may say they care, but genuinely don't care. And I've got a few friends who run businesses, and I think they've often, like, they're frustrated that their businesses haven't grown. And like deep down, it's because they don't care enough about their people, and they're not empathetic enough in their style. And I would say the last things is like, I think leaders need to be committed. They need to be resolved, because, wow, the challenges come thick and fast and they never seem to lack intensity. But despite that commitment and that resolve, leaders need to be kind. They need to see what's going on, put themselves in other people's shoes. And whilst I don't think it should ever be frequent, they shouldn't be afraid of at times showing a little bit of vulnerability, showing just a little bit of the human side. And I found in my own career that every now and then I've just shown a little piece of vulnerability, and that's had as much impact as anything else I've ever done, because people stop seeing you as just a leader and they see you as a human being as well. When those two really, really merge together, I think it's quite a powerful thing for any leader. Sorry, I've thought about this a lot, obviously, but there was a lot there.
No, that's great. Cheers. And also, I didn't say at the beginning, but I think we should run this as we would any other session. And if people do have comments or questions they'd like to ask themselves, to please include that in the chat function, and we'll come back to them at the end. So my third question is, what do you think the people who work with you would say are your best and worst attributes as a business leader?
Oh, this is petrifying. I would hope or think or guess, I think they would say I'm incredibly passionate about what we do. That, you know, want everyone as well to be passionate about what they do. I genuinely believe that when you can work for your passion, or you have that passion for your work, you just find more in yourself and you grow as an individual in that task. And that burning passion, I just want everyone to have, and I'd like to think people see it in me. I'm sure they would say I'm a creative thinker, perhaps much to their frustration at times, but you know, I'm always looking for ways that we can improve what we do. I'm always looking for ways where we can create new products and solve new problems for our clients. And I you know, enjoy that and want that to be in the DNA of the business. And I'd like to think they'd say I'm compassionate, that I do have the ability to think about them, and I want their lives and the business's life to be as aligned as possible, and work not to be the biggest strain in their life, but something that complements life and helps them grow.
And do you think, I'm just going to add on to that question just briefly, do you think these qualities come, you know, they've been sort of a part of you, your makeup, or have you sort of learned them over, you know, developed them over time rather, or, you know, have they evolved from you sort of interacting with other people or in your own work experiences with other organizations where you haven't sort of witnessed these kinds of things? Where do you think they come from?
I think every business reflects its leadership team. I don't think the DNA of the leader, particularly the founder, when the founder's still involved, like, isn't found everywhere in the organization, for good and bad. And as we're about to touch on my bad traits, I'm sure people would recognize them as well. But I think that what makes a good leader is someone who is prepared to keep learning and taking the feedback and assessing themselves, whether it's in small moments or big moments. Someone who's prepared to have coaching, someone who's prepared to be challenged. And I often use this as an example. I'm coming up to my 14th wedding anniversary, and I often joke with my wife that she's not the woman I married. But it's true that I'm not the man she married. Although we're the same people, we've changed drastically over those 14 years, because experience has shaped us, and common experience has shaped us, and hardship shaped us, and how we've seen other things happen to people around us has shaped us. And therefore, I feel like the business leader, although those traits should be there, they should also be becoming deeper and more nuanced and broader at the same time as the business grows. And if they don't, it's probably a sign that the leaders stop growing themselves, that the leaders taken their foot off the gas and isn't brave enough to assess who they are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And your worst attributes?
I was hoping you'd forget about that question.
No.
No, my worst attributes. I definitely have a bad trait where I can be distant, where I can, if I'm not bought into what's going on, like I think people can see that I might physically be in the room, but mentally I might not be. And particularly when that comes to an individual's performance, if an individual perhaps isn't performing the way I want them to perform in their role, or not in the way I believe they should be performing. Unfortunately, I have a habit of perhaps kicking the can down the road of dealing with that. I'd like to think that's sort of my compassion playing off against other things where I'm worried about how it might land with that person or what's going on in their life. But they're related. Because I don't deal with the problem that presents itself, I kick the can down the road. Because I kick the can down the road, I'm distant to the meeting and sometimes distant to the person. And as a result of that, they become slightly disenfranchised from me, which means they're disenfranchised from the business. And as a leader, you have an unfair relationship position in that you are always superior. And whether you laud that or not, it is totally right for a member of staff of the management team to expect you to come and raise a problem. It's much harder for them to come and raise it with you. And yeah, to my detriment, I do kick the can down the road, and as a result, I become distant and disenfranchise people. So something I'm sort of constantly trying to work on, and very grateful that my coach understands that in me. He's very good at prodding me and pushing me to make decisions and get things done.
And did that grow from a kind of self-awareness, or did someone bring it to your attention, or do you recall?
Yeah, I think a combination. I think I was naturally self-aware. I could almost physically feel myself withdrawing from situations. And also, as I've grown, as I've understood increasingly the need for a coach, and I know I've said in a previous episode, I waited too long. Like I'd say to anyone, don't wait till you think you need one, get one now. And as the management team have grown around me, and as I'd like to think I've empowered them to grow, they've become more confident in challenging me in those areas. And I've become more confident in sharing my weaknesses with them and making the point that your strengths make up for my weaknesses. So again, you're the smartest guy in the room in this situation, so push me to where I need to be. Don't let me get out of it. So yeah, combination of things.
Great, cheers. And question 4 is, how do you stay positive when times are tough?
Yeah, I was really reflecting on this because I think the business owner I am today with 11 years of experience relies on something completely different to what the business leader of 2 years experience would have had to do. Today, it's very easy for me to lean on my experience to say, well, the business has had trouble before, the business has had crisis before, the business has had trauma before, the business has had people leave before, the business has had people be angry with it before, and we've managed to deal with it. So experience plays a big part now. But actually, if I reflect back, and I think this is a better reflection to the budding entrepreneurs who might listen to this, or the people who are thinking about going and starting their own business, what got me through the difficult times at the beginning was complete commitment to what we do and the belief in it and the belief in the importance of it. And it wasn't like, like we had the blinkers on, but the commitment was so strong and the passion was so burning that it couldn't be put out and we couldn't be held back. So commitment at the start will drive you through. And then as you're driving through, you're learning from the experience. And if you can get to a position where I hope I'm in now, where you've still got that commitment, you've still got that passion, you've got 11 years of experience, and now you know where to go and ask for help. Like, it's quite a powerful concoction, and that's part of the journey.
Great. And my 5th question is, when someone presents you with a problem, how do you approach it? And I'm guessing this happens quite often in a senior role in a business.
Yeah, so it might look like I just passed the problem on to someone else from the outside in. Like when we plan in the business, have our quarterly planning days and set objectives and tasks, the goal for the CEO is never to own any of them. The goal of the CEO is to help others own them and hold them accountable for it. But what I tend to do with problems is close the door in the office, pull the curtain. I have like a traffic light system for my availability, and think about the human impact and the business impact of the problem that's been presented to me. And really sort of wrestle with that, like, you know, what are the scenarios available to me, how do they impact the business, how do they impact people, and try and find the right balance, because there's times where it's got to be business first, and there's times where it needs to be people first. And, you know, I think that's a great skill of a CEO. And then once I get that, I go and get the appropriate manager or managers and play out the full process and listen to their thoughts on it. And often they'll have slightly different thoughts, and that might change it. But effectively end at a position where those who need to implement the decision understand the rationale for it, understand the business reason for it, see that it's aligned to our core values, our goals, where we're trying to take the business, and then empower them to deliver it. And also advise them and tell them how they've got the support to come back to me or whoever else they need to go to in the execution of it. So it's, as I've just explained, it's more methodical than I ever thought, but that's the approach I tend to go for.
And you know, just to build on that a little bit, is it a relatively new approach? Is it something you've been doing for a while? Is it something you came to? Would Ben, you know, 5 or 8 or, you know, even in the beginning, you know, 10, 11 years ago, would you have approached problems in a similar fashion? Yeah,
I think so. I think the difference was, when it was a smaller business, I still had to deal with most of the problems. And it's sort of it references one of the points I made earlier. It can be incredibly empowering to be a problem solver. It can be incredibly empowering to be the person that people go to for answers. And particularly when you run a business, you should know all the answers. Particularly as a startup, you pretty much should know where everything is, where everything costs, where everything goes, who your clients are, so on and so forth. But if you hold on to that and the addictiveness of that, you're going to hold your organization back. So the default position of how does this impact the business, how does it impact people, what's the drive, what's the focus, what's the 4-year plan, what's the core values that I couldn't articulate them as well then as I can now, always. But the development, and the development that's led to growth, and the development that will lead to our continued growth, is the empowerment of the management team. It's to then say to those around, your opinion counts in this as well, and maybe it counts more than mine. This is where I've got to help me finish it. Now go and execute it, but I'm here if you need me. And I think that's the change, that's been the growth. And like, it's more exciting, it's more empowering doing this than it is holding on. And I would say to anyone who's holding on, like, believe me, put it to the test. It will take you 2 or 3 years, but it will change your organization and change you as well.
Cheers. And what would you say is the biggest problem that you face right now?
The biggest problem is unquestionably around transparency. Great organizations are as transparent as they can be. They really, really are. They understand that the staff, the stakeholders, the people who believe in your organization, give to your organization, deserve to know as much as you can possibly tell them about the organization to enable them to do their task. And it's so difficult to give people the transparency and the clarity that they want, they need, they desire in such an economic market as we find ourselves in, where it's so uncertain. And it's so challenging to know from one week to the next, what's the real state of the economy? What's the macro, what's the micro state for us within our industry? Even from like at the moment, the health situation, like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. So trying to give people transparency in uncertainty, incredibly challenging, and you know, something I'm constantly wrestling with at the moment, and yeah, trying our best at.
Is it also about knowing how much information to give to your team and not so as not to overwhelm them? Or
totally.
I'm guessing it's a delicate balance between too much and too little.
Yeah, it is, and also when things are uncertain, people will hold on to everything you say, but not necessarily interpret it the way you meant it. So, and I've had to learn this, and I'm increasingly learning this, that repetition is so important, that you can't just say, this is what we're doing, and expect people to get it and understand it, and process it and action it. You need to keep saying it in bite-sized chunks and make the message accessible, make yourself accessible for any clarity. and make sure all those involved understand it. And it's a work in progress. I wouldn't say I'm there yet or ThirdWay are absolutely there yet, but it leads to your point, Rachel. It's like you have to give the key message, you have to make it clear, digestible, and be available to keep repeating it, keep reinforcing it. So yeah, trying hard.
Great, cheers. And question 6 is, what's the best business decision you ever made?
This was hard because as an individual, I'm not spectacular at looking back. Like I'm very much always forward focused, and that's for good as well. I never really look back at the successes. I'm more likely to reflect on failure, but I'm always driven by the future. As I did reflect though, unquestionably, it was the decision not to sell the business. So about 3 years ago, we had an amazing offer to buy the business, where there was investment to scale the business, take it international, with people who had a track record of doing it. And also, personally speaking, it would have been life-changing. Yeah, it would have. It would have been. It's like fairy tale business, life-changing. That kind of moment. And I've never wanted to be driven by money. Always, if money is the first thought, it's going to actually lead you astray. You need to be driven by the passion and the commitment, and stay on that path, and the rewards will come. And the company who were looking to acquire us and invest in us, just increasingly we were getting bad signs about the type of organisation they were, and whether we felt that they were the right organisation for us. And sort of huge credit to one of my business partners who took me aside for a meeting and just asked a question. Was like, do you really want to work with these people? Because like the reward's great, and the carrot has truly been dangled, but if your life becomes a misery for the next 4 or 5 years, is that really what you want to do? And we looked at each other in the eye and said, actually, absolutely not. We don't like these people. Why would we take their money and maybe destroy something we've spent 7 or 8 years creating? And so walking away from that was tough, but definitely the best decision I've ever made for the business. And funnily enough, we've really reflected on that recently. In this difficult economic time, like I'm overjoyed that we didn't do the transaction, because the pressure and the restrictions that we would have felt wouldn't have enabled us to manage the company as well as we have done in the present, and protect it and position it so well for the future. So that was definitely it.
Number 7, thank you, is what was the most unpopular but best decision you ever made?
When COVID-19, the lockdown, the impacts of it were sort of first being realized and recognized, I knew, I could see sort of like the economic landscape that was going to happen. But actually, it's the back end of 2021 that's probably going to be the toughest economic time. That from a crisis point of view, there would almost certainly be a second lockdown, and trading wouldn't come back until probably spring next year. So that information, although lost in the headlines, did exist. It was there. And like you and I talked about before, it's like there's actually quite a lot of data about crisis and like the cycles that happen in crisis. So I was able to see that. But what it meant was that in seeing that, there would be some tough decisions to make about the business. It was either just ride the waves and deal with staff and headcount and overhead as you go through them, or see the waves and strategize for how you're going to work through them, protect as many jobs as you can, and actually come out of it in a position where you're ready to thrive. And in doing that, the way in which I had to protect jobs, to protect the business and put us in a position where 18 months, 2 years down the line, we will thrive, was to ask everyone in the business to commit to a pay cut, to ask everyone in the business to commit to not receiving commissions for a period of time. And look, there were other things we could have potentially done. We could have treated our supply chain terribly. We decided that was not the right path to go. It never is the right path to go. We could have made mass redundancies and said, we'll lose good people, the market's going to be full of people, we'll just recruit more. But the decision based upon actually what the data of the market and the pandemic's telling us, the business we are, the core values we have, the belief we have in our people, even knowing the damage it would do and the hardship it would do and what the uncertainty would do and the worry it would create, we knew was the right decision for the mass of the people. and for making the business as successful as it can be in sort of like 18 months time. So incredibly challenging, because you're dealing with hundreds of people's lives and livelihoods, and you can't help but think about the impact it's going to have on their families. Incredibly difficult because it's an incredibly challenging economic time, incredibly difficult because it's a pandemic, and as I said before, it's also a mental health crisis that if we're not already in, we're like steamrolling towards without realizing it. And incredibly difficult because, like, being frank, like, when you're the leader, it kind of rests at your door, and you've got two choices: either be sociopathic in how you deal with it and not let it affect you, or find a way of dealing with it and trying to look after as many people as you can. So that's been the most difficult and remains the most difficult. But also it's one I've got great commitment to and resolve in, and one I'm proud about, because I know we've done the best for the people and the best for the business. And in the short, in the medium, and the long term, we're seeing the fruits of that. Thank you.
And question 8 is, what's the one business decision you regret the most?
Funny enough, it's all around the people here. So about 3 years ago, we received a fine from the Competition and Markets Authority, the regulator on our market, on all markets, and it was incredibly unjust, in my opinion. And no, it definitely was. Like, if anyone ever wants to do a webinar on that, I'll happily go through all the detail of it. It was incredibly unjust, and it had repercussions for the business, because it really impacted the reputation of the business. And yeah, it was a large fine as well, so the business had to take its profits and pay that fine. And it was something that we had to hold and we had to deal with internally. And then when it was about to become public knowledge, we got the company together and very quickly, and on reflection, poorly dealt with it in perhaps no more than 15 minutes, in saying, this is what's happened. We don't believe it's just, but it's something we've accepted. And it doesn't change anything about who we are or what we're about. We keep going forward. And it was wrong, because I failed to recognize how invested the individuals in this business were with the company, how passionate they were about the company, about how it transacted, how it went about as business, how honest it was, the integrity within the business. And to have something that on the face of it seemed so bad and seemed to suggest that we had done something wrong, and then almost like be seen to brush it under the carpet so quickly, hurt the staff. And yeah, that was it was a bad moment in my leadership, because I was so consumed with how stressful it had been for me and how angry I was at the injustice, and so aware of the job I would have to do to go and speak to all of our clients, that I failed to recognize the impact it would have on staff. And that really helped me understand better than ever the need for transparency and the need for clarity and communication, and again, just caring about the people.
Maybe it goes back to that question, can you give too much or too little information? And maybe in this case, you're also thinking you didn't want to overwhelm people and provide too much negative information.
Yeah, I think
it was also about the narrative.
Yeah, that's unquestionably true. Unquestionably true. There was a cognitive process of, oh, it's been so stressful for me, I don't want anyone else to worry about it. We've got to deal with it.
Exactly.
But that was a flaw. It was flawed, because it wasn't treating people like people who are invested in this business. It just wasn't. It was just treating people as if they don't need any negativity in their lives. But actually, as we all know, often we grow from adversity, we grow from challenge, not just having sort of a smooth ride. And I just failed to recognize that there was growth to come from that challenge. There was growth to come from that negativity. And actually, I stifled growth by trying to push positivity and hide from the negativity. So that was a big learning, and it was definitely the worst decision I ever made, because of the impact was so big. So it didn't come from perhaps arrogance, it didn't come from deceit, but it was just a bad decision for the impact it had.
Yeah, and as we've also discussed in the past, difficult times, negative emotions, these things can also bring people closer together. So
yeah, absolutely.
Word to the wise. So question 9 is, many CEOs have this reputation of being grounded or grounded in reality. Do you think you are grounded? You're a grounded person? And if so, what keeps you grounded?
I'm genuinely absolutely no idea. I'd be so fascinated to do a survey with the staff and see what they come up with, because I definitely like to dream big. I definitely do, and I love creativity and pushing boundaries. So I'd be really interested to see if that is offset against any kind of grounding. I think if I did have any grounding or any advantages with grounding, like I do have like just a really lovely family unit, and unquestionably when you've got as I do 3 young daughters to go home to, you've got no chance but to be grounded, because frankly they don't really care about what the P&L or the balance sheet looks like. They're far more interested in me being involved in whatever games we're playing with dolls, so on and so forth. And I'd like to think sort of my Christian faith keeps me grounded as well, that like it stops me from looking for materialism or self-recognition in terms of what we do, but makes me very focused upon being at peace and being content and being about people. So I'd like to think there is some grounding there, but as I say, I would dread to see the survey and see what comes back.
Okay, so that was another part of my question. Do you think your employees would agree that you're a grounded person, or would they say otherwise? And I think what you're implying is that you need to wait for the survey results.
If I had to like put my stake in the ground, I'd say I'd like to think yes, but I think it goes back to that letting your staff see you for who you are, like showing that little bit of vulnerability occasionally, being prepared to spend time with them and talk to them about things that aren't just the task at hand, because that leadership and humanity hand in hand really inspires, and I hope they see some of that.
And maybe it's also about not getting carried away by the successes or the failures that the business goes through. Yeah,
I've often reflected on that. Like, your job as a leader is never to get too high on the highs or too low on the lows. And maybe naturally, I am fortunate that I have a natural disposition to look to the future. So I don't overly celebrate and I don't overly get down. It's always what's next. But that has a bad side, because sometimes it stops you from reflecting on why something bad or something good's happened, and either crystallizing it and making sure you do more of it, or recognizing the failures in the organization or your leadership and tackling them. So yings and yangs there for sure.
Okay, question 10 is, what's the best piece of business advice you ever received?
So this was very early on in my career, and I was walking down Oxford Street with a guy called Phil Brown, and Phil Brown was a contractor who ran his own business. I think he was brought up maybe in Bermondsey or somewhere like that, and moved out to Kent. But he was a really fascinating guy. Loved his wine, loved fine art. So he was in contracting, but had sort of really become quite sophisticated in his taste and his approach to life. But as we were walking down the road, in a very sort of South London gruff way, he said, "Ben, I'll give you one piece of advice for business." He said, "Never cross the road for anyone." And what he meant was that in all of your dealings, in all of your transactions, act with a certain level of integrity, that whoever you bump into in life, you're never embarrassed by it. You never have to back down or shy away. You can stand there head held high, that you did the right thing, that you were honest, and you did fundamentally what was right. And I've always held that close to my heart in what we do, because sometimes it is tough, and whether that's with clients, whether that's with the supply chain, whether it's with stakeholders, whether it's with staff, and I've always held within my heart that however I act, whatever I say, whatever I do, I want to be able to walk down any street anywhere in the world, and if I bump into that person, I'm not hiding, I'm not embarrassed, I'm not ashamed. I can sort of stand there and talk to them sort of head held high. And really interestingly, about a year ago, about 2 years ago, I had to exit someone from the business. And this person sort of, they exited because they lied. They lied to me, I shouldn't go into the details, but about very sort of specific things, big things. And I approached them in a manner which was, look, I'm pretty certain this has happened, but if you give me your word that it hasn't, I'll take it. But also, if it has happened, I'll work with you to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And he gave me his word that it hadn't happened, and it materialized that it had, and I had to exit this person from the business. And about 6 months afterwards, I was walking down the road, and I saw him walking towards me. And all of a sudden, he sort of looked up from his phone, saw me, and tried to cross the road, pretending he hadn't seen me. And it was just that sort of wonderful crystallization of a truth that in all your dealings, never feel that you have to cross the road or feel ashamed. Just do it with integrity, hold your head high, and it will just get you through life, and certainly get you through business incredibly well.
That's a great piece of advice, and thank you for sharing it with all of us. And last but not least, from my questions, that is, question 11, what do you still want to achieve that you haven't yet achieved?
I want to make myself redundant. I want to build this business and empower the leadership team to keep growing, keep taking on more responsibility, more ownership, so that one day I walk in and realize it's being led by other people in a far better way than I could ever lead it. And I can sort of proudly get my slippers, dressing gown, and pipe out, and go and sit at home, which is something I know I'll never do. I'll find another way to cause trouble. Oh, I don't have a pipe. It's just my image of retirement is it's probably built on some C.S. Lewis style image. But yeah, that's the goal. I think there's a drive inside me that will always want to change the industry in which I work. Always make it better, always look for that area of grey where you can provide a product or a service to a client that hasn't quite been considered before. That will always drive me. But the overriding business owner, CEO, founder goal is to build this organization that outgrows you, that doesn't need you anymore, that's better without you, that is still a market leader, it's still profitable, and where you can look back and say you've empowered others to take something forward. So that's the goal.
Thanks, Ben. And I have a couple of questions from the viewers. The first question is, was ThirdWay your first business, Ben, or did you have others before? And do you plan to start others in the future?
Yeah, ThirdWay is my first love. It's my first business. But within the business, we have started other businesses. We've set up sister companies. We've done joint ventures. We've done investment businesses. So I don't think that's ever going to stop. I think that's going to be my makeup now. It's something I enjoy, so I would never give up something I enjoy. I started ThirdWay when I was 26, so I was quite young. The opportunity came, and it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was an opportunity that was so good I couldn't turn it down, but it was an opportunity in which I could recognise that there was the opportunity for me to do something that I loved, something that I was certain I could be good at, and certain it was in a sector where I could grow and grow as an individual whilst doing it. So that's what ThirdWay did for me and continues to do for others, and I hope it always does that. But as I say, like, part of my hope is that it outgrows me and one day I go and start another business. Or actually my dream would be that one day sort of another business from another industry asks me to go and help lead that and go and like try something new, using a lot of the skills that I've learned and applying it elsewhere. So yeah, sorry if I've rambled and not really answered that question, but a bit of an insight into my response.
Cheers. And the last question is, touching on your approach to dealing with problems, do you find that process of dealing with those problems gives managers more autonomy to make informed decisions within their teams?
Good question. I do believe so. I believe it's a work in progress, that it's not just about going to the manager, look, it's your decision to make, here's everything you need. It's about working with the manager to upskill them, to be able to process it and refine it in their own way. So I'm a big believer in what Daniel Pink wrote about in his book Drive, about sort of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And so the job isn't just to have my process and pass it down. The job is to upskill the manager. So as the problem arrives with them, they're able to take it and execute for the business and for their team in a way that empowers them and helps them to grow as well. So yes, it gives them more autonomy, but it has to be around a support network that's helping them in other areas as well.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. So that's all we have time for. Thank you everyone for joining us, and happy birthday to ThirdWay, and take care, and we'll see you soon.